we're going to talk about a love triangle, a paradoxical love triangle devised by Gibbard. It's a case that is closely related to the libertarian paradox. In fact, it's a version of a libertarian paradox. But it has some interesting features, and it suggests that if we're to come up with a Pareto-consistent libertarian claim, we have to distinguish between various kinds of rights. And in particular, we have to recognize that the liberty rights that are given by any kind of libertarian principle have to be recognized as alienable rights, rights that we can waive or give away or grant to someone else, that we can make a choice about whether or not to exercise. Because we have preferences about how to live our own lives, but we also do have these busybody interests. We have these other directed preferences. And we have to decide what's stronger. Do we really want to live as we want to live, or are our preferences about how other people live even stronger than our preferences about ourselves? Now, at first glance, you might think, well, it is a very strange thing to say they might be stronger. After all, we do think of such people as busybodies. But the significance of this case is that doesn't seem like an absurd concern. In fact, it seems like, yeah, this is a situation where it's very plausible to think that somebody's other directed preferences are actually stronger than their own, and that it makes good sense for them to waive their liberty right in such a situation. So let's introduce our characters. Character number one is the beautiful, the enchanting Angelina. Angelina is a wonderful person. She is somebody who cares about other people, and she has many admirers. Among her admirers are our two other characters. The first one is Edwin. Edwin is single and likes the single life. He's a bit of a player. He likes Angelina very much, but she isn't the only girl he's interested in. He is a jealous type, though, and so he doesn't like it if anybody he likes ends up with someone else. And finally, there's the judge. The judge is somebody who knows both Edwin and Angelina and is a great admirer of Angelina. In fact, he's in love with Angelina. But, as we'll see, he's a very selfless sort of person. When he loves somebody, he just wants what they want. He wants them to be happy. So here is our situation. If we think this through, let's take a look first at Angelina. Angelina likes the judge very much. In fact, you could say she loves the judge. But really, the one that makes her heart sing, the one she is set on, and is kind of gaga over, is Edwin. So Angelina adores Edwin. Her first choice would be to marry Edwin. But she does love the judge, and she recognizes that the judge loves her, and so she would be happy marrying the judge. The last thing she wants is to remain single. She has, after all, two admirers. She's very fond of them both. One really excites her. The other she loves and thinks she would be happy with. And so her first choice is Edwin. Second choice, the judge. Third choice, to stay single. Now let's turn to Edwin. Edwin, as I've said, likes Angelina very much. But he also likes the single life. So his first preference is that he and she remain single. On the other hand, he's a jealous guy, and he certainly doesn't want her to end up with the judge. Him staying single and Angelina marrying the judge, that's his worst case scenario. And so he would rather marry Angelina himself than have Angelina marry the judge. But again, his first preference is that he remain single and that Angelina remains single too. Now the judge, as I've said, is actually quite selfless. He loves Angelina. But he recognizes that he's a little bit older, and he feels as if he doesn't fully deserve Angelina. But in any case, he thinks, look, what I want is what she wants. His other directed preference here is very strong. He wants Angelina to be happy. And so he says, if Angelina would rather marry Edwin, I want her to marry Edwin. If she wants to marry me, fantastic. I want her to marry me. If she'd rather remain single, I respect that. I then prefer she remain single. And so his preferences end up matching Angelina's exactly, but in this kind of indirect way, because it's really like I prefer whatever Angelina prefers. So let's put these considerations together. Edwin's first choice is that everybody stay single. His second choice is that he marry Angelina. His third choice, that Angelina marries the judge. He really doesn't want that to happen. Angelina's preferences and the judge's preferences are exactly the same. Angelina wants to marry Edwin. That's her first choice. Her second choice, to marry the judge. And her last choice, to remain single. So if we think about those, and then think about them from a libertarian point of view, we say, well, look, people don't have the right to decide for other people what they will do about marrying or not marrying, but they do have a right to decide for themselves whether they want to be married or not. And if they decide they would like to propose to somebody and perhaps marry them, then, well, it should be up to them who they would like to marry. And so we turn first to Edwin, and Edwin says, well, I want to stay single. That's my first choice. Angelina says, well, my first choice would be to marry Edwin, but if he wants to stay single, then my best available choice is to marry the judge. The judge basically says, well, whatever Angelina wants. And so it looks as if we allow each person to exercise their liberty right under a reasonable libertarian principle here that says it's your choice whether or not to get married, then Edwin stays single, Angelina marries the judge. Now that's a little bit strange. From one point of view, we can say, nobody gets their first choice, and in fact, Edwin gets his last choice. Edwin does stay single, true, but that means that Angelina marries the judge, and his jealousy comes to the fore. That's actually what he really didn't want to happen. Angelina and the judge, meanwhile, get their second choice. Angelina marrying the judge instead of marrying Edwin. And so it looks as if, well, nobody's entirely happy with this. Nobody gets first choice. Edwin actually gets his last choice. And then we say, let's think about places where they agree. They certainly disagree about staying single or getting married. Edwin likes the single life, Angelina doesn't. But there is a feature on which all three parties agree. Edwin says, I'd rather remain single, but hey, I'd rather marry Angelina than have her marry the judge. Angelina says, well, I'd rather marry Edwin than marry the judge. The judge says, I want what Angelina wants, so yeah, I guess I would prefer that she marry Edwin if that's what she wants, then marry me. So all three people rank her marrying Edwin over her marrying the judge. And yet, if each person exercises their libertarian right to choose what to do for themselves, Edwin ends up staying single, Angelina marries the judge. And so everybody would prefer her to marry Edwin than for her to marry the judge. We end up with a situation that everybody agrees is suboptimal, that everybody would prefer another option to. And so in this case, the exercise of liberty rights gives us a situation that everybody agrees is inferior to another available option. Well, that's a strange situation. So we could think of it from this point of view. We can say, look, Edwin would really rather that everybody stay single. He can't choose for Angelina, but he can choose for himself. And so he says, I want to stay single. Well, okay, he prefers that to marrying Angelina. But now everybody prefers him marrying Angelina to her marrying the judge. And then she says, well, I'd rather marry the judge than stay single. There's something very odd that has gone on here. It looks as if everybody staying single should be preferred by society to Angelina marrying Edwin. That should be preferred to Angelina marrying the judge. That should be preferred to Angelina and everyone else presumably staying single. And so we really do have something of a cycle. And that seems utterly irrational. It looks like something fundamental in our conception of social choice has gone awry. Once again, a libertarian principle seems to run into conflict with the Pareto principle that says we should respect unanimous preferences. Now, Gibbard says, think about this in the real world. It looks as if the choice really comes down to Edwin. He's got a conflict between his own preference for how to live, which is to stay single, and his other directed preference about what Angelina does. He would like to remain single and have Angelina remain single. But if he stays single, Angelina's going to marry the judge. So that option is really not on the table for him. And he has to decide, would I rather stay single and be jealous seeing her marry the judge, or would I prefer to marry her myself? In other words, he has to say, is my self-directed preference about staying single stronger for me, or is my other-directed preference, based on my jealousy about her marrying the judge, is that the stronger one? So he has a choice to make. We could frame it this way. He has a liberty right to remain single if he chooses. But other people too have liberty rights here, and in this case are going to do some things that are going to make him unhappy. So he has to decide whether or not to exercise that liberty right. Now, rights granted under a libertarian principle to choose for yourself how you want to live within a certain sphere, we have to recognize then are the kinds of things you may give up, you may waive, because your other directed preferences are actually stronger. Let's say, like Edwin, you'd rather remain single, but man, you don't want Angelina marrying the judge, and so you choose to marry her yourself. That is a situation where you choose to waive your right. And so the moral of the story, Gibbard says, is that our liberty rights under any adequate Pareto-consistent conception of libertarianism have to be recognized as alienable rights, as rights that you can waive, you can give up, you can surrender in the face of things you care about more than exercising that right. Some rights, like the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, might be unalienable. They're the things you can't give up. You have those rights, and you really can't waive them. You cannot sell yourself into slavery, for example. And so we have to think, these liberty rights, they're not like that, okay? They can be waived, they can be surrendered, they can be given up. And Edwin may well choose in this situation to do that. Once he recognizes that it is not possible for him to actually bring about the situation where everybody stays single, the most he can do is stay single himself, but that leads to his worst case scenario. He is probably going to choose to waive his own right, his own preference for remaining single, and instead marry Angelina. Well, we get an interesting love triangle then. One where Edwin loves the single life, Angelina loves Edwin, and the judge loves Angelina so much and so selflessly that he wants whatever will make her happy. In that situation, what happens? Well, as we've seen, the choice really comes down to what Edwin chooses to do. Is it his self-directed preference that takes precedence, or is it his other-directed preference? Which is stronger, his desire to remain single or his jealousy? Well, tune in next week to find out.